Hi, it's Chris again. Obviously, I'm recording these back to back, drinking the same cup of tea. You get to look at my dirty dishes and glorious kitchen. This one is going to be about kind of the self-imposed traps that we put on ourselves as someone who is transitioning and dealing with all of the stuff that some people just don't have to deal with. There are plenty of outward placed traps that you have to deal with. You really have to try to avoid doing this stuff to yourself. So, and what I mean by that is, like, things are difficult enough sometimes. And I'm not saying, I'm not one of these people that are like, you need to have a positive mental attitude and you need to just believe things are going to happen, and, you know, the secret sort of version of reality. But there is some version of that. There is some truth to that, that if you are constantly looking for things that are problems, you're going to find a lot of problems. The problems are going to find you regardless. You don't need to go out of your way to make things more difficult. One of the things, sorry, I'm looking at my list. One of the things is a lot of the problems we deal with are not specifically just trans people that deal with them. I have known an awful lot of fairly butch lesbians that get misgendered semi-regularly. And that's, sometimes it's because of how they dress. Sometimes it's, you know, more than that. But I find that it's interesting because I find typically they deal with it very well because they're not doubting themselves. You know, they're not doubting who they are. Somebody misgendered them. Oh, that's crazy. Oh, that was weird. Or that guy's was a kind of horrible. But it's not just to specific things to trans, especially getting misgendered, especially people specifically intentionally misgendering you. That is a very common thing. Not as much now, but it was really bad early on. It does happen to everybody, not maybe every single person, but it happens to a fair amount of people and more than you would think. It's just that it doesn't typically come up. One thing that is a problem is putting things off. A lot of people will put off things like the official name change, getting your paperwork right, and a lot of that is the dread of, you're afraid it's going to be more difficult than sometimes it is. Sometimes in some states and some cities, and it may be more difficult than others. But whenever possible, just pull the Band-Aid off, get it done, because you're going to constantly have to deal with not having done it. And, you know, there's people I know that they're always mad that they're being dead named. And I'm like, okay, that's your legal name still. So maybe fix that and then get mad about it. If it's still your legal name, it's still going to come up and you're still going to get mail and you're still going to get people addressing you that way. And not all of it is intentionally to make you angry. Some of it's just the reality of the situation. So try not to put off any more than you have to. Most of the time, a lot of that stuff doesn't cost a ton of money. I know when I changed almost everything in a day. Like, I went to court, I went to everywhere else, like one day. I just went ham. I took the day off and I just did it all. I speedrunned it. But that was after putting it off for a number of years. Like, I didn't get everything officially changed until I think 2 years into the job I'm at now. So that was 20 years ago. But I think we do tend to put a lot of things off that we probably should just get done. And that will help alleviate some of the problems that you get mad about yourself. a lot of other stuff, like for female to males, I don't have a ton of advice because obviously I'm not. But there are some things that are good for both, and one of them is, doing the voice training. I obviously I don't care. And that comes from early on when I transitioned. I had a bunch of issues with people finding out later and then being horrible about it. And so for me personally, I never did the voice training that I can do. I've done it enough to know, like, I can do the voice if I need to. But in some ways, I kind of would rather people know off the bat. And it's not because I want to tell you about it. It's not because I want to talk about it necessarily. I would just rather you know, and then I know, and I know you know, and whatever. That way you don't have to worry about it coming out later. To me, I've never tried to go past to where nobody knows. And if somebody asks me, I will absolutely tell them, yeah, I'm trans. Like, so what? I don't ever want to get into the position where I feel like I'm in another closet. And if we get there because of politics, or if, things start turning worse, I'm going to fight that with every bit of my being, because I would much rather people know, and I just don't have to worry about like a bad reaction later. That is as bad for me as being in the closet. If I'm trying to get to a place where I'm totally stealth and nobody knows, and it imposes some, it creates a situation where you are constantly scared that people are going to find out. So I personally, I'm not a fan of that. But a lot of people are. A lot of people do for safety. I don't feel unsafe. I have spent a lot of time with, self-defense, and I am less concerned with that kind of stuff than other people are. I live in a fairly very blue city in a fairly blue state. I am not super concerned with safety. Probably wouldn't be even if I was in a place that wasn't as accepting. But for some people, voice training, don't put it off if you feel like you need that to get to a place where you don't have to worry about like being clocked or whatever. There's a bunch of good resources for it. You can look online. There's a ton of people. If you look at like voice feminization, there's a couple of really good YouTubers. Seattle Vocal. I can't remember the name. Seattle Vocal something. There's a Discord, and you can do online voice training. I'll try to remember. I'll do a video with like resource links and stuff at some point where I talk more in depth about like places you can go for to get help for different things. So what else? Like one of the things that I put off for a long time is doing laser, which hair removal. It's amazing. Like if you're the right skin type, which I am basically clear skinned and was dark haired, like perfect example of what, like the perfect candidate. If you are good for laser, it is borderline life changing. And the other thing is we tend to focus on the things that we don't like about ourselves. That's not unique, obviously, to trans people, but our insecurities are usually based on how well people notice, and how many times you get misgendered, like unintentionally. And those are things that suck, and there's always going to be some version of that. You can only deal with so much, and Sometimes there's things that only can be dealt with surgery. Sometimes there's only things that can be dealt with by doing the work, like voice training. You just have to put in the time. Everybody's capable. And so the only excuse sometimes is all this stuff costs money. And unfortunately, very often we don't have the best jobs. There's a lot of service jobs. A lot of us have. I know when I transitioned, I had to basically quit where I was, and it was hard. Like, I took a job that I was making less money. I was not as financially secure. But those are all things that, like, if it's worth it, then you have to do it. And if it's not worth it, then it's not a problem because you're not doing it. So that's just some of the things about the stuff that we put on ourselves. And all of that's to say that there's people that everybody deal with, but because you're trans, you tend to suspect that it's because you're trans. It's not always. And we all deal with a lot of stuff. And I remember one of the first times that I talked to somebody at work, and she was a lesbian, and she was fairly butch presenting. And she mentioned I said something about, oh, the person misgendered me, and it's kind of irritating. She's just like, yeah, I get that all the time. And completely unfazed. And that not only taught me, like, I'm getting in my own head, and also sometimes people are just guessing. Sometimes people aren't paying attention, and a lot of times they'll hear me and they won't look at me, and then they'll say, oh, sorry. And I've learned just to it doesn't bother me anymore. It used to, and I found that the people that are doing it intentionally, it bothers them when it doesn't affect you. So that's been my go-to ever since. It's just, if you want to have a problem with it, cool. It's really your problem. But it's worth it to keep in mind there is enough that is difficult about transitioning and dealing with all the stuff involved with that. Try very hard to not make it more difficult on yourself, because you can't do anything about those issues, but you can at least be an ally to yourself. And I know that sounds a little trite, but it's worth reminding yourself every now and then. So I think that is enough for this one. Not sure what the next few are going to be about, but I'm going to record a few in a row. That way I can get a cache so that I can make an attempt at one a day for a while. So until next time, check in on your friends. They probably need it. They probably need it as much as you do. If you don't have any, keep an eye out and make some.